Hey, welcome everybody. We've kind of got a round robin going on today on the show. With Stonebridge Wealth Systems, this is Retirement Compass Radio Show. I've got, look at that, Tim Kulhanek in the Lincoln office, and he doesn't join us very often, but isn't it thrilling to have Jeremy Gove in the Kearney office? How are you both, fellas?
Doing fine, thanks.
Good. How about you, Jer Bear? Sorry,
great.
Jeremy.
Everybody's got to be a comedian.
Well, I'm sorry about it. You know, I get away with a lot with these fellas, so.
No, that's good.
Things are going well.
Thank
You guys getting excited about the change of season and all that? My gosh, do we have a lot going on?
Yeah,
there is a lot going on for sure.
very excited.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very excited. Thanksgiving here on the horizon. Government shutdowns no more. We still don't have an answer on the ACA subsidies. I mean, I just not sure exactly what's going on. We need some protection.
I don't know how people get out of bed.
I don't either. We need some protection from our friends at Stonebridge.
That's why we're here.
Good.
Stand in the gap.
Yes. You know, that darn nest egg thing, I think that some people have a whole lot of nest but no egg in the mix, and maybe that's why they should be contacting you guys to get a plan together. Many retirees, they do the right things. I say we. You know, we've saved, invested, paid off the mortgage, all of these retirement number things that we want to check the boxes off of. But how do we pay ourselves or reframe the retirement income plan to serve us long into the future? What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think you're talking about a balanced, comprehensive approach to retirement, and it really depends on so many factors. So I was in Austin, Texas, here a couple weeks ago at Ed Slott's Elite IRA Advisor Group meeting. We get together every 6 months, and there was a researcher there from Morningstar, one of Morningstar's researchers that works on retirement planning topics. And the title of her discussion was Safe Withdrawal Rate. What is it, essentially? And so in other words, it's like how much, so three big questions, right? When can I retire? Will my money last as long as I need it to? That's kind of what we're talking about here. And then the other big one that I hear is like, will my family be okay if something were to happen to me? And, you know, regarding that second one, will my money last as long as I need to? How much should I be taking out? I get that question fairly frequently. And after her presentation, it was about an hour long, I came to the conclusion that, nobody really knows. It really, really depends on a lot of different factors. So, for example, what are valuations, equity valuations at the time that you retire? When they're elevated, so equity valuations today are elevated, it's a little bit of a concern because it's like, well, are we going to get substantial growth for the next 10, 15 years? And when we talk about sequence of returns risk, we know that the first 5, 10 years of a retirement red zone, we say is 5 to 7 years of either side of retirement is such a critical time for you to ensure that you want to still grow your money, but to really protect what you've got and avoid big losses. So equity valuations were one of her points. 2 was interest rates. Where are yields at? Because we know from high quality academic research that if you look at where yields are at any given point in time, the expected forward return for bonds over the next decade tends to average around what the yield was. So if yields were around 4.5%, odds are, if you're using history as a guide, that if you invest in bonds, let's say that was a corporate bond, then corporate bonds are going to average about 4.5% for the next year. And then number 3 is inflation. And what Wade Pfau says about this, Professor Wade Pfau, Dr. Wade Pfau, he's one of the lead researchers and educators at the American College for Financial Planning, and wrote basically the closest thing to the quote-unquote Bible when it comes to financial planning. He's on his 10th or 11th edition of his retirement planning, not for dummies, but DIY approach to retirement planning. He says that if you have high inflation at the beginning of retirement, it's almost like a sequence of returns-esque risk, because if you have high inflation early in those initial years of your retirement, you have to take more money out, right? So you're losing purchasing power early on. And then if inflation simply normalizes, so you don't get deflation, but you get disinflation, this is exactly what has happened to people who retired in 2022, 2023, right, Jeremy? Where
Absolutely.
They had 9% inflation they retired into. They haven't had deflation. They've had disinflation, where all of a sudden inflation is normalized to around like 3% if you look at the October print. That means that their baseline spending was 9% higher day one, then it's getting adjusted. So what is a safe withdrawal rate? How do you know whether your money is going to last? Organize, track, and test. That's the only advice I can give you. You have to organize everything. You can't have like 15 different custodians or 15 different accounts. The financial junk drawer approach isn't going to work. You have to track everything. We track everything here at our business. We know, every dollar that goes in or out that we spend on marketing, we spend on this radio program, that we spend on the TV program, that we spend on, reserving a room for maybe one of the educational workshops we're going to do. Mm-hmm. You have to track things. I'm not saying you have to sit down and do an old school Excel spreadsheet of your expenses, but you should have a good idea of how much you need in order to achieve your basic goals, and then test different scenarios. What would happen if I retired at this age? What if I wanted to put in a pool in the backyard? What if I wanted to spend $15,000 a year on vacations for the next 15 years? And that's exactly what we do here at Stonebridge day in and day out.
Sure. Use this number to reach out so you can get this information and get a team working for you. 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. One of those is healthcare costs, Jeremy. I feel like they jump up and bite folks, especially if it's a large item. Some, Medicare, unless you have a supplement, doesn't carry dental. And so there you have a couple of root canals. Now where are you going to be if that's not planned for?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's so many expenses that I think when we're talking about inflation, you typically think of 3 to 4%. Inflation with healthcare has been substantially higher than that. Oh. And I think the numbers, I've seen ranges from 5 to 7%, depending on what you look at and what they're tracking. So inflation on healthcare is extremely high. And if you add in long-term care expenses, that actually could even be higher than that.
That really scares me because they need to put that into the overall inflation numbers and distribute that to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the problems with some of that data. One of the things we talk about here at Stonebridge is the data that you have or your inputs are going to affect your outputs, right? And so Tim mentioned making sure that you know what you're spending, how much are we spending every month, and how much are we spending on, this or that. I think, historically back through, as we worked with a lot of different clients, one of the things that we would send a budget worksheet home with them. They would come back and they would say, I had no idea I was spending that much money on my Dish TV or my whatever that contract would have been. And what they would end up doing is they would go cancel it because they're spending $250 on Dish TV and I don't watch that much TV. I had no idea I was spending that much money on it. So it's the same thing with healthcare. I do think it's important to, like right now with open enrollment, I think there's a lot of people coming into our office, meeting with our staff to talk about, their Medicare supplement, dental, vision, as you mentioned. Am I on the best plan for what I need? There's a lot of questions about that. And so I think it's important to analyze that every year, if not every other year for sure.
Mm-hmm. And this is easy enough to book into the Stonebridge system, if you will. Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146. And then you can be seen at whichever office you'd like to be seen at. Kearney office, Grand Island, Lincoln. Let's see, Omaha. We also have the traveling man himself here, and that is Jeremy Gove, and he will come to you. They're happy to come and see you where you need help. 866-295-5146. So do you talk to folks about the long-term care costs? We could do a whole nother, maybe the whole next segment, because it still is, Jeremy, Long-Term Care Awareness Month. And so I feel like that discussion just can't be had often enough, especially if somebody is witnessing what's going on with their parents or a sibling or aunts and uncles and grandparents, and suddenly, boom, they have an illness or they have onset of dementia, and now we're scrambling. What are we going to do?
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems that most people don't realize the cost of long-term care, the cost of the care itself. Until you have a relative or if you have a family member that goes through it, that's when you really see, okay, what does that cost? What is it going to take to go through that process? And I mean, depending on what type of care you're getting, it could be $5,000 a month. If you need memory care, it could be $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 a month. And one of the things that we talk to people a lot about is we didn't scrimp and save our whole life just to give it to a long-term care facility, right? And then you have people that go out and buy long-term care insurance, which is something that we're not against. The challenge with long-term care policies is a lot of those weren't underwritten correctly. So you have these groups of people that have, maybe they have a $200 a day benefit, and the company like Genworth or other companies that are out there that are selling these policies, they've realized, okay, we sold way too many of these policies. We're not collecting enough premium. They go to the State Department of Insurance and they say, hey, we need to increase our premiums. So they start increasing those. And it's not uncommon anymore to see rate increases of 20 to 30% per year just because they're trying to catch up on that.
Oh, man.
It's pretty amazing when you stop and think about, you bought a policy when you were healthy, because a lot of times when we're talking about health insurance, it's really important to keep in mind it's your health that's buying the policy as much as your money is. So if we're unhealthy, obviously we're going to pay more if we can even get a policy. But you're healthy, you buy a policy, you go out, you spend the money, and you get the daily benefit that you think is going to make sense for you. Mm-hmm. What happens is 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, those premium increases start to apply, or they come into effect, and the company will give you an opportunity to lower your benefit, or if you have some sort of rider where it increases your benefit based off of a 3% or 5% daily benefit increase, maybe they'll freeze that. So you're buying a policy thinking when I'm 85, it's going to be there for me when I need it, and then you realize it's not what I was taking. This isn't what I bought this for, because I kept reducing my benefit or freezing my benefit. So now my benefit, because it's frozen, is not keeping up with inflation, the inflation of the cost of healthcare. And so that's the challenge that most people are facing right now.
Well, let's talk about the alternatives coming up on our next segment. To reach Stonebridge, it's 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146.
Is your retirement being eaten up by financial termites like hidden fees, inflation, and avoidable taxes? Call today for a complimentary financial review so we can help you root out these retirement killers.
So, because it is, I don't mean to harp on it, but November's going to be gone before too long. Welcome back to Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, but it is Long-Term Care Awareness Month. And Jeremy just explained standard long-term care insurance and the changes that have crept into that, what people thought were the only way to fund long-term care policies. Did I get that out right, Tim?
Yes, that means yes.
Okay, good. Good. How else can we fund this type of care for ourselves before we have an event? Before there's a crisis.
I was interviewed by CBS Money here a couple of years ago.
Nice.
And they were writing an article. It was on like legit CBS Money official website on CBS News.
Market Watch, yep.
And they said, when should people buy long-term care? And why should they buy it? And I actually turned around. I'm like, well, let me tell you why they shouldn't buy it. And they're like, well, that's an interesting take. Yeah, and they liked it, and they put it in their article. And so, not everyone needs some sort of long-term care insurance plan is what I'm trying to say. There's a few different ways you can pay for long-term care. You can self-insure. So you just pay out of pocket, right? That could be the most expensive if you need long-term care. In fact, it would be if you needed extended care or care over extended period of time, let's say 3, 4, 5 years. Maybe both spouses need some amount of care, maybe 2 for one spouse and 4 for the other. It's a total of 6.
Could be devastating to the savings too, of course.
It could be. Yeah. So self-insure. A lot of people think like, oh, well, I'll use Medicaid, right? Isn't that what Medicaid's for? No. Medicaid's for poor people. Like, that's not a derogatory thing to say. It's for people who have fallen on hard times, right? That need assistance because they can't provide for themselves. It's not for wealthy people or people who have accumulated wealth who try to hide it in order to qualify for Medicaid. And,
Right.
I go to those Ed Slott meetings, and Shannon Evans, who's an estate attorney out of Las Vegas, comes every time and gives a presentation, and it's awesome listening to her. And she said, like, what are you talking about? You want to qualify for Medicaid. Your desire for your, let's say it's for your parent, you're going to help them, or for your spouse. Your desire for your wife is for her to eat oatmeal with a wooden spoon for the rest of her life. Like, really? That's what you want for her?
Golly.
That's kind of terrible. And so, like, you have to understand, Medicaid means Medicaid facility. It means like Lancaster Manor. You're not going to the Landing. Number 3 is, a lot of people think they can hide money using a Medicaid asset protection trust. But most of the people, Jeremy, I think you'd agree, that we meet with and work with, not all, we work with a lot of farmers that a lot of their wealth is tied up in land, but most of the people outside of the ag sector, the majority of their wealth is in their retirement accounts.
Okay.
Their 401ks, their IRAs.
Yeah.
Can you put that inside of a Medicaid asset protection trust? No,
No.
you cannot. You have to
Okay.
take the money out first. So, like, I'm going to then I'll drain my $1 million or $2 million 401k, pay a boatload of unnecessary taxes, and then I'm going to hand it to a Medicaid asset protection trust. I'm going to put my house in this Medicaid asset protection trust, transfer my cost basis. I bought my house for $80,000. It's worth $500,000. So now I'm going to burden my children with way less money because I paid a boatload of taxes I otherwise wouldn't have paid, and couldn't grow it because it just sits in this Medicaid asset protection trust. Oh, and by the way, they're going to have to pay capital gains tax when they go to sell my house. So, like, when we talk about the ways you could pay for it, self-insuring, Medicaid isn't great. Self-insuring isn't great. Medicaid's worse. You could buy long-term care insurance. Before I get to that one, I would say like VA benefits, but that's also not a guarantee. Like, there's
No.
only so much room. And like, I think there was somebody at that Ed Slott conference that said, right now in America, there's like 60 million unpaid caregivers, and like 15 to 20% of them are under the age of 18. So you've got a lot of 18-year-olds taking care of maybe it's younger siblings, but also parents, right? Or grandparents.
Grandparents.
And
Wow.
it's estimated to cost the economy in time, lost work, that sort of thing, somewhere around $1.1 trillion, according to the guy that gave the presentation. And so this is a devastating problem. I think there's 7 people who need care for every 1 person that can provide care.
Right.
And so there's a massive mismatch. There's not near enough, like, if you think about assisted living, you see all these assisted livings coming up, being built. So like over off of 70th and Pine Lake, there's a new one that's being built here in Lincoln. It's like, wait a minute, there's one off Highway 2. There's ones over here off of 70th and 56th. And over here in Williamsburg, we got the Landing and the Legacy, all these. Yeah. You know why? Because there's a massive tidal wave happening. You know, at first we called it the silver tsunami with all the baby boomers retiring. Well, my dad's on the front end of the baby boomers, and he's going to be 80 in February. And so they're getting closer and closer to that age where more and more of them are going to need this type of assistance. And from a statistical standpoint, we know that if you've got a couple age 65, there's like at least a 2/3 chance one of them is going to need some sort of assistance. And so, like, we have this habit of impressing those statistics onto everyone but ourselves, right? So in other words, hearing that, but there's like a level of cognitive dissonance where it's like, oh, well, it's too bad for those 70% of people that are exactly my age and couple, terrible for them that they're going to have to go through that. I'm glad it's not me. So with long-term care insurance, again, I know I've gone on a very comprehensive approach to this answer. But with long-term care insurance, the bottom line is you don't got to go out, like Jeremy said, and buy one of those old school traditional John Hancock, Genworth, not trashing those companies, just that they were the big players in the game. Mutual of Omaha sold a lot of those policies. I've seen those things blow up over the years. People not be able to afford them because their rates have gone up so much. There's a lot of other hybrid policies. So yeah, it's Long-Term Care Awareness Month. You need to be aware of it. You need to know the statistics. You need to know the facts. But at the end of the day, the reason you put a plan in place together, the reason you put a plan in place put something together isn't because of, trying to protect your assets or trying to make sure that you leave more money to the next generation. That's like, I'd say, a secondary, third or fourth tier type of reason. The reason you want to have a plan in place is so that you don't leave a mess and put your family in a position where they have to make decisions for you because you didn't make decisions for you. That's why you should have a plan in place when it comes to long-term care.
Boy. And the number to call Stonebridge, 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. And can I give you an example of a kind of a tragic situation? But I was talking to a friend of a friend, and the lady is 78. Her name's Bernadette, and her husband had sudden onset of dementia. Couldn't find his way home in the car one day, just boom like that. And then has fallen now and has broken his hip. And she didn't have a plan in place. Although they have significant assets, she went to an elder care attorney, and I'm not bumping them, but now she's on a big fat retainer with the attorney's office, and they want to put her in things that could put her, the rest of her wealth and her legacy plan at risk, and may not even provide sufficient care for the husband, no matter what's going to happen with his health. So here she is with 6 children, adult children, all going, Mom, what are you going to do? Mom, what are you going to do? Imagine the pressure that old Bernadette is under. Plus, she has to make decisions on where to have the care for her husband be placed. And I can't say enough. I could hear it in her voice. I just was heartbroken for her.
I mean, this is literally a conversation I just
had. Yeah.
Yeah, we have these, I think, all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, I stopped to see my grandma last night, actually. She's 90, I think she's 93.
All right.
And she was actually talking about this. She mentioned to me that when she was younger, when she married my grandpa, he really wanted her to stay home. Well, she ended up taking care of her mom and her mom's mom. So she was actually a caregiver for 2 people.
Wow. And
it caused a lot of stress in their relationship. And she actually told me that last night. She said, we were, your grandpa didn't really want me to, work, but I'm really working because I'm taking care of 2 different people and I'm not getting paid for it. So not only am I using a ton of my time, obviously I want to take care of my mom. I want to take care of my grandma, but the cost, as Tim was talking about, the emotional cost is something that doesn't show up on any of the reports that we have. When we're talking about how much does this cost, the emotional cost can be more, I would say, substantial than the actual dollars and cents cost.
That's harsh. It really is. When this whole issue could be discussed with a planner, and you guys have so many fresh ideas on how to help folks either fund a solution with leverage, right, or self-fund. But it all starts with a plan of what you're planning to leave for your family. What kind of a legacy, whether it's an emotional legacy or a dollars and cents legacy, and frightening to think that most people just don't have that. So I guess that's why we're on the air marketing that very idea. It's not that we're selling something. There's no cost, no obligation to sit down with Stonebridge, right? You guys aren't asking for a canceled check out of their checkbook or something to have this consultation, Tim.
Right. And here's what I tell people that maybe they heard something about long-term care. They heard that, it's expensive and it's unaffordable. Mm-hmm. They heard that, your premiums will go up and then they'll price you out of it, or they can cancel your care, or they don't have to cover everything. Or I heard somebody owned a policy and they didn't get, 1 penny out of it and they had to really fight the company. Yeah, there's horror stories out there, but it doesn't mean that's the way it is for everybody. And so what I would tell them is, look, if something you thought to be true turned out not to be true, when would you want to know about it? And if the answer is, I'd want to know right away, well, then my advice to you would be to call the number that Jackie is going to give you again and find out the truth about what's going on with long-term care, what your options are, so you can make an informed, educated decision and ensure that, again, you're protecting not just your assets, but your family from the emotional, physical, and financial consequences of a long-term care event.
866-295-5146 to call Stonebridge, 866-295-5146. Be right back.
As Americans, we strive for better. From a better house to a better career to a better life for our children and grandchildren. Better has become the American way. When it comes to your retirement, What does better mean to you? Does it mean more income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions? A better retirement begins with a financial plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
Something new and nifty with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and that is a text code set up for Social Security. Text Social Security to 308-270-4635. That's 308-270-4635. What do we get when we do that, Jeff?
So, yeah, when you text Social Security to that phone number, you'll get a Social Security guide. It kind of gives you generally kind of a 30,000-foot view of how Social Security works. The important thing with Social Security when you're looking at that is, when you make that decision to start drawing, whether it's at 62, drawing early, taking a permanent reduction, or you're filing at full retirement, or waiting till 70, that's a decision that you're making for the rest of your life. So we think it's really important just to know what your options are.
Right.
So that's a good starting point, is just getting this guide to kind of get you started, and then from there we can fine tune it.
Oh, that's good. It's kind of for the rest of your life, you're stuck with that decision. But that's the way it is with Social Security, right? There's no mulligans unless you want to pay it all back in that first year.
Yeah, and I've had one person ever do that, and they changed their mind because they hadn't actually received a check yet. Most people aren't going to write the check back to the government, but when you look at Social Security, for a lot of people, that's going to be your biggest asset. When you look at how much income you're going to get over your lifetime, and when you look at a percentage of your income, there's a lot of people that are living on Social Security as their primary source of income. So we have to make sure that we're making good, educated decisions on these things. And again, that guide is an easy way to get started.
Okay, so again, it's 308-270-4635, 308-270-4635, and then you text and type in Social Security, and that will bounce back the link to the guide, right?
Yep. You'll get a text back, and they'll ask your name and email address so they can send it to you.
Okay, fine. And there's no obligation when using this, by the way. We always want to make that clear that Stonebridge is happy to help you, but if you do need them, it's at 866-295-5146 number that we always give during the show, 866-295-5146. Social Security, boy, everything is at top of mind right now with the Medicare silliness, right? Well, people are getting registered for Medicare. We still don't know about the subsidies for the ACA. That hasn't been voted on. So politics or government, if you will, is top of mind, I feel like, for a lot of people right now, Jeff.
It is. And, with Social Security, you get cost of living adjustments every year, potentially. But the other side of that is the Medicare premium. So your Medicare premium goes up. They give you a raise on your Social Security, but you're not actually getting that full raise because some of that goes to pay for your Medicare. But again, if we're using this as one of our primary sources of income, making that decision is really important. The other thing is, that Social Security Trust Fund is not doing well. If you watch the news, it's set up to fail or to run out of money. So if let's say in the future you get a 20% reduction on your benefits, making the right decision today is going to help you in the future. So maybe it makes sense to wait a little bit to take your Social Security. Some people, it makes sense just to draw it at 62, draw it when you can. But everybody's situation is different. But it is a really important and could be a very expensive mistake if you do it the wrong way.
Sure. Again, it's text Social Security, type in the word Social Security to 308-270-4635, 308-270-4635, and that's compliments of Stonebridge Wealth Systems. It's a freebie.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. the one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
If we don't need long-term care, I mean, we want to make you aware, long-term care aware here on the show, Retirement Compass radio show. But let's say you think, I'm never going to need long-term care insurance. Why would I get this thing if it's just money down the toilet? Now, we've already discussed that there's other ways to do this. There's a modern way to approach it. So Tim or Jeremy, you guys talk me through how I could do this without having a policy where I have to chunk money into it every month and I'm not going to get a benefit in the end.
Well, as Tim mentioned, you can self-insure. So if you think the likelihood of me needing a long-term care plan, or if I'm going to have a long-term care event, I think the statistics tell us that 63% of Americans will use long-term care at some point in their life. I know that includes people that have fallen, maybe they broke their hip, fell down, and they were in a facility for, however long that takes to heal, 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is, 12 weeks. So those people are included in that number. Okay. And so, if you're willing to roll the dice, if you think you're in that 37% or whatever the number would actually be, that's one thing that you can do. That's why we call it self-insurance. I'm taking the risk. I'm going to use my money to pay for my care if I need to do that. So that's one option. But option I really like to use for a lot of our clients is using a long-term care, or it's actually a life insurance policy with a long-term care benefit. And we call it a hybrid product. And there's several companies that do that now. I think there's going to be more and more that come into the market with products like this, because what I like about life insurance with long-term care is I'm going to get a benefit one way or another. We all know at some point we're going to die, and that's the reality that we live with, right? So I'm going to get a benefit one way or another. The key to building those types of policies, that's the part there's got to be a lot of planning done so that you buy a policy that actually makes sense for your situation, and not just something that, we're just throwing darts at a wall and kind of making some guesses. But I really like the life with long-term care because a lot of times it's a great way to multiply your money and turn, let's say I was going to put $60,000 into a policy. I may have a long-term care benefit of $180,000 to start with. But if we build it correctly, by the time I'm 85, I might actually have, $480,000 of long-term care benefits. But my death benefit, the key to making this work correctly, my death benefit might only be, let's say, $70,000 or $64,000. So the goal is to keep the death benefit low. It's not a good return on my money if I'm just thinking about it from just a simple return as far as, okay, I put $60,000 in, I live 30 years, I pass away, and my family gets $64,000 or $70,000. That doesn't sound like a good trade-off, but if I do need long-term care, that's where the real return comes into play.
866-295-5146 to call Stonebridge Well Systems and ask about that. Okay, I heard them talking about long-term care, or I've witnessed this. Show me what you got. 866-295-5146. Can this money that you're talking about, can it grow?
Yes.
So it can grow, and then if we need to use it for our home care or assisted living or whatever that is, do we get taxed on it when it comes out?
See, that's the beauty of this. So this was, you could see me if you're watching the podcast. I've been doing some research, and I couldn't remember for sure, and I verified I was correct. This was all part of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of which year? This is quiz time, Jackie. When was HIPAA passed?
90s.
Yeah. Clinton was in office.
So 92.
96. Good.
Good answer.
And HIPAA, right, enacted in 96, has provisions that defined qualified long-term care insurance contracts under Section 7702B of the Internal Revenue Code, and allowed long-term care riders on life insurance and annuity contracts to receive favorable tax treatment. And then the annuity thing was kind of expanded under the Pension Protection Act of 2006. So the answer is yes, it can grow. There's different ways to do this. You can have like an ADBR, so Alpha, Delta, Bravo, Romeo. That's the phonetic alphabet. I know
ADBR.
most of it. Accelerated death benefit rider. Okay, where basically it says, hey, I've got a $500,000 death benefit, and it'll pay me 2% per month until the benefit's exhausted. So $10,000 a month. And the beautiful thing about it is you don't pay up front. You're underwritten for life insurance, but you don't pay for the rider. There's not an ongoing premium just for the rider, so to speak. It's built into the premium of the life insurance, but you don't have to like write a separate check to say, oh, well, this is for my long-term care, this is for my life insurance. They kind of charge you on the back end with a discount factor. So depending on when or if you need it earlier, there's going to be a higher discount. So in other words, instead of the full 10,000, maybe you only get like 9,500 or 9,000 or something like that. And don't quote me on it. I'm giving you an example of they don't actually deduct their fee unless you use it in a way. And so that's an accelerated death benefit rider. There's other policies that are actually long-term care riders where it's not really designed to be for like the leveraging effect that life insurance gives you. You're not going to have like a $500,000 death benefit. So I ran a case the other day. These people in their late 50s, but like, again, people might hear that and be like, oh, well, I guess I'm 65. It's too late. No, like I've written these policies on people who are in their early 70s.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's still underwritten, so you have to be in reasonably decent enough health. But like this policy that I'm referring to, it's kind of simplified underwriting. It's either standard tobacco, standard non-tobacco, standard tobacco couple discount, standard non-tobacco couple discount, decline. That's the only options. So there's 5 basically. And if they put in, I think it came out to like like $90,000 if they want to do a 1 pay. You could do a 10 pay. You could do a 7 pay. You can do a 5 pay. We can build this however it fits for your unique financial situation. But you get a bit more leveraging if you do a single pay. And so if you had lazy money, in other words, money that you like was sitting in a CD and like the writing's on the wall, CD rates are going to continue to fall, and you just wanted to reposition that, you're like, well, that CD money, that $100,000 in that CD, that's my long-term care money. Great, you'll be able to pay for 6 months of coverage,
Right.
So instead, we reposition that into something like this. It might only buy like $144,000 of death benefit. So there's not like, yeah, it's more. So the beautiful thing is you're never going to pay for something you hope you never use because it's life insurance. So as Doug Shada used to say, I got news for you folks. None of us are getting out of here alive, right? Jeremy alluded to that earlier. With this life insurance concept, if you die peacefully in your sleep at age 95, having never needed any sort of assistance, despite all the facts I was throwing out earlier, statistics, I should say, guess what? There's $144,000 that goes to your beneficiaries tax-free. But if you do need some sort of assistance, it's kind of like a hybrid where you get accelerated death benefit. You'll use that $144,000 first. So that'll be gone right away. Because in this policy that I'm describing, it's a $6,000 per month benefit or $72,000 per year. You take $72,000 times 2, it's $144,000, right? So it's used up in the first 2 years if you needed care immediately. But then that long-term care piece, that grows at 3% compound per year. So in this scenario, 20 years later, like your benefit's going to be substantially higher than $6,000. It could be $10,875 or something per month of tax-free benefit, and you can design it for however long you think you might need it. If I got a lot of longevity, hey, mom was in a facility for 5 years, okay, well, I better get a 6-year policy. If it's like, I just want to make sure that there's something in case, I need some sort of even home care so I don't burden my spouse, okay, maybe I can do a 4-year policy. So you can really customize this to your unique financial situation. But again, you're avoiding the use or lose it. You're avoiding the potential raising of your premiums later on because it's level premium. Even if you did a 10 pay, they can never increase your premium. You never have I have to use it before it runs out because the policies are guaranteed, a lot of these, to age 120. And so you've got your work cut out for you if you think you're going to outlive it. And your beneficiaries or you are always going to get a benefit from it. There's no way that you'll have that phenomenon of living with the idea that you paid for something that you like, God forbid you ever have to use.
Boy, that has to be good for your mental health. 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Call Stonebridge. And there's no way to lose that money, right? Because in the insurance policy, it's a living benefit.
Yeah, once it's paid up, it's paid up. So
Okay.
like whether it's a 1 pay or a 10 pay, as long as you pay the premiums, once it's paid up, it's done. And it's guaranteed to 120, and it's going to continue to accelerate at that 3% compound if that's how we set it up.
And we can pay all at once if we want.
If we want, again, it's everybody's situation is different, but
Right.
like there's a lot of like we know that there's like what is it, Jeremy? Like $6 trillion in money market funds, U.S. denominated money market funds, globally. So there's a lot of money just making
sitting there.
3.9%. But give it a while, and it could be making 1.9% or 0.9%. And again, we need to make that lazy money work a little bit harder.
The money market account being the lazy money. 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Be right back.
Did you ever think your retirement would be shared with our government? It's true. Your traditional 401k, IRA, pension, or similar retirement accounts are like a partnership with the IRS. Simply put, they want their tax dollars, and you have them. With our latest tax calculator, you can plug in your own numbers while sitting at home. To find out what your future tax liability could be, scan the QR code or go to stonebridgetaxbill.com.
Retirement Compass radio show with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, spanning the globe with services, or at least spanning the Midwest for sure, and the United States. Yeah, because a lot of people have their first house in Nebraska and then move on and have a home somewhere else, Colorado, or even internationally, Mexico, Arizona. I know Arizona's not international. What I'm trying to say is Stonebridge can help you regardless of where you're hearing this message, because we do have a pretty far reach now with the YouTube channel. And you can find the Stonebridge Wealth Systems YouTube channel on YouTube. Or we also publish the podcast. So all of our shows that we've done together are available in podcast form under the Retirement Compass. All right, we're talking about long-term care and how to pay for it and who needs it and what it really is. And it is Long-Term Care Awareness Month. So it's still November. And Tim, you have a recent occurrence story to tell.
So let's assume for a moment, just a hypothetical here, that you find yourself in your mid-60s and you didn't purchase long-term care insurance of any kind because you were like the folks that I talked about earlier. Maybe you didn't need it, or maybe you said, yeah, I probably need it, but I'll just pay out of pocket. I'll roll the dice, so to speak.
Lump it, right.
And then you find yourself in a situation where, you've been diagnosed with some sort of chronic illness. Could be something like multiple sclerosis or another neurodegenerative type of thing, cognitive impairment that starts to creep up, and you know that, hey, I'm not going to be safe in my, current environment indefinitely because I can't put it on my spouse to be able to provide 100% of my care. And the question arises, because it's usually the man that faces this first. The question arises is, what do we do now? How do we pay for it? And, that's exactly the scenario that clients of mine have found themselves in. And this is going to shock you, and people might not believe it, but, the cost for his care is $530 a day. And if you do the math on that, that's about $190,000 a year.
My goodness gracious.
In 2025 in Lincoln, Nebraska.
My golly.
And so, when Jeremy threw out, hey, if you have a cognitive type issue, it could be 12, 13, that's not hyperbole. That's reality. And so the question is, how do we pay for this? And this is where working with someone who understands not just, long-term care, not just investments, but the tax side of how they interact with one another, I think is really, really important. So client and I had a conversation yesterday, not the client that's the community spouse, so to speak, right? Not the institutionalized or whatever you want to call the one that has the chronic illness.
All right.
So I talked to her, and they spent about $190,000 this year on his care.
Golly.
And there was some money available that they had that was, could be used, that was after tax money that they could use to pay for it. Now that was my recommendation, because if you end up, there's a little bit of nuance to this, but if you end up in a facility like a nursing home or a skilled nursing type of scenario, then you can itemize on your tax return and you can fully deduct the expenses for room, board, meals, everything, right? Medicine, all of that is an itemized deduction. And so we put that on their Schedule A in our tax planning software. And I found out that, they've been taking distributions as well to help supplement to pay for this care. It didn't all come from the money they had available, but they've already withheld from their distributions from IRAs and things like that. We've been withholding tax throughout the year intentionally. And the total withholding for them will end up being probably somewhere around, let's just say like $15,000. And what I found when I was doing my prep yesterday is that they can move, because of this giant itemized deduction that they're going to be able to utilize, along with, SALT, state and local tax, and any charitable and that sort of thing. You add all of it up. Total deductions might come out to just over $200,000. Well, they can use that if their income is high enough, because for medical expenses, medical deductions, you can deduct out-of-pocket medical over 7.5% of your adjusted gross income is the way that it reads in the tax code. And so what we're doing is we're doing a large conversion, and we're going to convert somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000, and she'll come out of pocket at absolutely zero on that, because this large deduction is going to offset enough of the otherwise what would be tax bill to where what she's paid in already, what they've paid in already through their withholding from their IRA distributions, pensions, Social Security, and other types of incomes they have coming in, is going to be sufficient to satisfy their full tax bill. So it's like, hey, I can use this or I can lose this, because there's some like charitable deductions. You can roll those forward for, I think, 5 years. But unused healthcare deductions, I don't think you can roll those forward at all, right? So it's a use it or lose it scenario. So I can either be an effective planner and leverage the situation to extend the lifetime of her money, because by doing this conversion at basically zero cost, right? Because they've already paid it. And so a zero cost conversion, I can move $100,000 roughly from tax deferred to tax free. Let's say 3 years from now, he's not with us anymore, right? Well, now she's a single filer. Now she gets into higher brackets sooner, right? Now she has half the standard deduction that she did otherwise, and she doesn't have any of those medical expenses to write off on a Schedule A. She would, if we didn't do this, not only would we lose the ability to take advantage of it because we wouldn't be able to carry those deductions forward, but she would, in perpetuity, she would be in a higher tax bracket than necessary, because she'd have more tax deferred money. Because of the death of the first spouse, you do lose the lower of the two Social Securities, but the required distributions don't change very much because you don't lose any of the IRA money. So like the moral of the story is it a bad situation? Yes. But as my sister-in-law, Jessa, would say, sometimes you've got to make lemonade out of lemons. Or was it lemons out of lemonade? I don't quite know. But in any case, you got to make the best of the situation. And that's really what we've been trying to do here. Now, I will tell you, there's the human side of this. And like when Jeremy and I say we deal with this on a regular basis, this is true. As I was talking to her, she goes, Tim, one of the questions I have, and then her voice started to crack. Oh. And she said, how am I going to pay for this next year? How am I going to do this? Now, like, I see it from a different perspective because I'm very left-brained, right? So left brain means that it's like I'm data-driven, right? I want to see just the facts. I want to dig in. I want to get the numbers. And I want to know why, not just that something's going to work, but why it works. So that's what I did for her. I built it out into a plan in our planning system. And like even if he had to, because they did a good job saving, because of this tax efficiency that we're going to implement into their plan, the next few years we'll essentially we'll take distributions. We might not be able to do the conversions because they've used up their taxable bucket quite a bit, but we should be able to avoid taxation. So we'll be able to take money out of their pre-tax accounts. So in other words, a rookie advisor might be like, well, let's just use up all your taxable money and then let's use the Roth to avoid taxes. Terrible idea. You got these massive deductions for medical. We need to start using those, take pre-tax money, take it out tax-free, and we're extending, again, if they otherwise would lose 25% of that money, I'm making those dollars go 25% further every penny we take out. And so at the end of the day, the money's going to last longer. She's going to be in better shape. And they still had over a 90% probability of success, even if he was in there for another 3 years, which gives me, I mean, he could be, but statistically not likely. And so, I want to be there for people when they're in those kind of trying times and encourage them and reinforce them that they're going to be okay. And I think that's what I accomplished yesterday on that call.
Oh, gosh. That's a big story. 866-295-5146. 866-295-5146. I think you did accomplish that. Helping people. That's what you guys do.
Yeah, and if all else fails, like I said, just make lemons out of lemonade.
Because I'm thirsty now that you said that. I'm ready for some liquid refreshments. Coffee's not pulling the trick anymore. We're getting close to the end of today's show. Do you have, Jeremy, any closing comments on this whole subject of Long-Term Care Awareness Month for folks?
Yeah, I think the concept I would leave with you is nobody plans to fail, right? Most people fail to plan. And I think that's the message that I want people to take away from this show today is we want you to have a plan. And we've talked a lot about long-term care, but it's having a plan in place for every different thing that you're going to deal with in your financial life. It could be an income plan, it could be tax planning, it could be investment planning. The goal is to have a plan. And Tim outlaid that really, really well. He gave a great example of the type of planning that we do for our clients and the ability to make lemonade out of lemons. I mean, that's a situation that nobody really wants to deal with, but having a plan and having a planner on your side, they can help walk you through, okay, here's my situation. How can we make this better? It's not going to be great. The ideal situation would be nobody would ever go into a long-term care facility, right?
Yes.
But let's make the best of the situation. And that's what Tim was doing. And he is extending the life of their money, which means that number one fear that most people have when they come into our office is, am I going to run out of money? We're extending that so that the likelihood of that happening is it's not very likely. So that's our goal. Our goal is to plan. And so if you're listening to the show and you're thinking, I've never really thought about long-term care. I've never really thought about what the different options are that are out there. That's a great reason to give us a call. And Jackie will give the number, but it's a great reason to give us a call and walk through what are the options that you have based on your health, based on the finances that you have, and putting a plan in place.
Get it done, 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Good to have someone in your corner, especially when times are tough. I can't reinforce that more heavily than I am. 866-295-5146. Tim, thank you. Jeremy Gove, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
See you guys next week.
Yep.
There's our music. We have time today, too.